Hi everyone, welcome to another STEMS webinar. Today's webinar is for system administrators or STEMS admins and account owners to manage users. Our last webinar that was on STEMS accounts was to do with creating or inviting users and also removing users. Now, before I get started, if you have any questions, feel free to just type that question through. I will be checking those questions over the next 30 minutes and doing my best to answer them as well. And if we're out of time and I need to follow up any questions, I'll get back to you no later than tomorrow. Also, what I'll do, even though we have covered STEMS accounts, for those that didn't attend the last webinar on that subject or basically just need a refresher, I'll just clearly explain, I guess, the differences between STEMS accounts to do with users and managing users in STEMS 1 and Comply 1. So, of course, since October with our new platform, because we are going down the path of some separate applications that are also integrated with STEMS 1, we needed a central place to first of all manage user accounts. So just as a quick refresher, because we won't go into great detail on this, first of all, in STEMS accounts, there is the subscription section. All right, so you do need to manage number of users in here when you and all you need to do is make any changes and then click on the change button if you do need to add more users and you're at your limit. To invite users in the user section there, you just simply click on invite and put in their email address. If you want them to be mobile only users, so that's anyone you don't want to actually access STEMS 1 or Comply 1, but you do want them to use the mobile apps to, say, report incidents or hazards, or with Comply 1 filling out checklists or forms. If you decide that they also do need access to STEMS 1 and Comply 1, then you have these three basic STEMS accounts roles to select from. Now, for most, it will be just STEMS user. The differences, again, these are all refreshers, is admin is able to invite users and remove users, gives them full access to STEMS 1 and also Comply 1. Sorry, and account owner can do all of those things, and the only difference there is they can also manage the subscription section. And you can have multiple account owners. Also on this page is where you now select who their line manager is going to be, and then finally event manager. Keeping in mind the line manager still has to be a user because of some of the functionalities in relation to a line manager. Just quickly on that, a line manager, just as it was in the old STEMS, the line manager can log into or open up, say, for example, an incident or an event, or I'll put it another way. If a user's like, trying to find the best way to explain. If I'm the event manager or, of an incident or an event, my line manager can go in on my behalf, basically. And they also get notifications to do with booking of training and so on, completing training. There's quite a few features with that line manager. And all of that is detailed in the user guides. All right, so once that invite's sent out, and as we explained in the previous one, they then need to activate that invite. And initially there's a page where they set up their first name, last name, phone number if they want to put those details in, and that will activate it. Also, I should point out there's a few things we're working on at the moment. We need to continue to improve the workflow of creating that new user, because of course at the moment when a user, they will get the email, but if you're the person who has sent that invite, you're basically waiting for them to activate and you're not too sure when they do, and you currently will have to go into admin user security and keep an eye out for once they activate, they will appear in the user register. And so what we've done to improve that, and hopefully releasing soon, I would imagine in the coming weeks, the improvement on that workflow will be that the person sending the invite, when the user activates it, you will receive an email that they have activated, and they will not be assigned to any organisation structure or security role. So coming very soon, you'll be able to get, when you get that email, you'll know that they've activated, you'll be able to come in here. And keeping this in mind, the same thing, even when currently we don't have that notification in place, you do need to come into the user data filter. This is now where you will assign their org structure as well. This is also getting updated. The menu will clearly identify that this is the user data filter and organisation structure assignment. You search for that user. And I'm not going to find the one I was looking for. But you select your user and assign the organisation structure. And then you can decide whether it's going to be primary only, all, or custom. Now, for those that haven't worked with this area before, or for those that need a refresher, primary means that, for example, the user's permissions, wherever they're assigned in the organisation structure, then their permissions only apply to that part of the organisation structure. So that item and its child items is where those permissions would apply. All, if you select all, then that means no matter where the user is in the organisation structure, their permissions will apply to all of the organisation structure. And then finally, there is a feature for custom. I'll probably have to make sure I select a user, bear with me. Don't know why, but it's not letting me search for this particular user. Okay, find another one. And that is, I can go to custom and we're able to select what part of the organisation structure you want those users' permissions to apply to. A few little helpful features too. If you want to select rather than ticking everything, you can right click and click on select all. And then down the bottom, just click on save. All right, so keep that in mind. Even now, when a new user is activated, you will need to go into the user data filter section to apply their organisation structure and also decide the whether it's going to be primary, all, or custom. And it's probably one of the most common areas when we have support regarding users being able to see things. There is usually a good chance that it's to do with the data filter. All right, so from there, and we're not going, because of time restraints, we're not getting into great detail today about security roles on how to, but I will take you briefly through them. So also that new user or an existing user will need to be assigned to a security role, or you need to change a user to another security role. In here, first of all, keep in mind too, you'll notice our STEMS default, which is really, they are templates. If you assign a user to our templates, you cannot change the permissions on the security role. if you want to use that security role, you would have to change permissions on the user, and I'll show you that later on as well. We do recommend though just using these like a template, and what I mean by that, so to create a new security role, click on create new, create a name for that security role. We recommend with description to give a brief, I guess, overview of what that security role can do. So you might put things like events, actions, hazards, and just put that information in there so you've got a quick summary of what that security role can do. You can then, you don't have to, but again, this is what I was talking about earlier with our templates, is you could then select one of our security roles to copy the permissions across, which will then give you the ability to customize. So you select that, click on, and actually I won't click on create. We've got enough in there as it is. And if we just open up one now, once it's created, you will have this view. On this tab, you can assign users. There's a few different ways to do that, and I'll point them out as we come across them. So you can search for the user and click on add user to role. Also permissions. Now, the other thing we did do with the latest version is greatly reduce the amount of permissions. And we are going back through that again because we've had some things come in from support regarding, on one hand, we used to have complaints of too many permissions, and now that we've reduced them, we're getting requests for more permissions. So we are revisiting that to make sure, while we still want to avoid getting too many permissions, we are trying to make sure there's still some flexibility to achieve whatever it may be. Now, my advice when doing the permissions is to do it in sections, because often if you read these, you may get them confused. For example, manage news, and also if I hover over it, we get a brief description, although it's appearing in a funny place here on my screen. But manage news is not to be confused with viewing it, for example. This manage news is actually referring to the administration of news. Also, a side point, by the way, our new mobile apps, anything communicated through here also goes out to the mobile app users, all right, not just on the STEMS homepage. Now, what you should do to go through these permissions, in this drop down, you'll notice it reflects pretty much the menu at the top. And starting with admin roles, if I then click on filter, we know we are just looking at permissions to do with this part of STEMS. All right, important. This is a really good way to systematically go through the permissions. And that way we know now, because I've selected admin, that is the section of the software we're looking at with these permissions. All right, and there's that manage news permission. Also, keep this in mind that obviously if it's a security role where you're not wanting users to access admin at all, then of course you would make sure it is deny, and that means they will not even see this section at all. One of the first things to check. Next is the library and so on, and you just make your way through reviewing. We better not get in the trap of going through all the permissions, of course. If you do have any queries on specific permissions, or there's something you're trying to achieve, of course, put that through to support, and one of us will be able to assist you with that. All right, so just make your way systematically through each section, and that is my advice for making sure that you're setting up the right permissions and you're understanding what you're looking at. There is a feature too where I could, for example, I don't want to just look at safety permissions, I want to look at specifically to do with events, then I can filter that down, right down to just the event permissions. All right, next on the security role is no org structure restrictions. with no org structure restrictions. This is an important feature that often is not known about and very handy, because keeping in mind we've got the user data filter where we're saying that that user, that where their permissions apply within the organisation structure. But of course there are scenarios where the business says, but when it comes to certain sets of data, we want to share that. So you can only do this at a security role level. So you could say users on this security role, no matter where they are in the organisation structure, no matter what their user data filter, we want them to see all events. We might need them to access all assets, no matter where they are in the organisation structure too. So I could tick that and click on update. So what this is doing is it says any users assigned to this role will have no user data filter applied to the following selected areas of STEMS. All right, so keep that in mind. A very handy feature to basically ignore the user data filter for each user assigned to this security role. All right, so that's basically security roles. Again, there's the register of security roles. There is a number, you can see how many users are assigned to that role. Another way we can manage users in security roles is this feature here, and that is edit user in security role. All right, so this feature here, I can select the security role, and then I can actually just tick the users that I need to assign to that security role and click on update selected users to security role, and that would shift them across into that role. All right, there is another feature, sorry, I missed up here. There's two ways with reallocating user data now. I'll go back to the main register first. So we have the user register, and we can reallocate items associated to a user. So I've clicked on reallocate items. That's the user we're moving the items from, and here we select the user we want to assign the permissions to. Also, keeping in mind, it does pick up on the user's permissions. So when I select that user, for example, if the user was not a line manager, then this would be grayed out. I wouldn't be able to reassign anything to that user. So if there were personnel here and they're not a line manager, that would be grayed out. I wouldn't be able to shift that data across. And all you do is select what data you're wanting to move across and click on reallocate, or if you just want to select everything and do it that way. But also we understand it may be wanting to break that further down and reallocate certain items. So I've got this feature here where I can say with actions that are raised by, there are 4. But I should also point out, once an item is closed, say like an event or a hazard that's become eliminated or an action that's closed out, they will not be listed here. The user, for example, this being me, if I've previously closed out any actions or events, my name will forever stay on those records, as in it's not going to get reallocated to someone else. Even once this user account is removed, the user information stays with that record for good historical purposes. But I can also just click on this and I can see the individual actions, and then I can further click on the ID to open up that action and review the information before deciding who I'm going to reallocate it to. Then I can just select specific ones. Obviously I've got to put in the user's name, sorry, and click on reallocate. All right. And over here, reallocate user data. It's the same feature in a different place. All right. Okay, so further down, we've got user permissions. So I was saying earlier, where if a user is assigned to a security role, which gives them a set of permissions, you can also further customize the permissions over that security role. All right, so even though this user's got a certain set of permissions, if I wanted to, I could further customize. In this case, I'm saying, all right, with this one, I'm going to say deny, and then I just scroll down to the bottom and click on update. And vice versa, if it's something that the role says they cannot do and you want them to be able to do it, then obviously select allow. The benefit of that feature is you don't have to create, and I have seen, unfortunately, understandably people not aware of this, that will create dedicated security roles for nearly every user, and I have seen that. And that's really unnecessary. If you've got a security role that's almost suitable and just needs a few changes, then this section is suitable to achieve that. The last two features, multiple users versus permission, and then multiple roles versus permission, is designed mainly to assist looking at who has, it might be a question of who has access to, say, the tab of the personnel profile, say the work history tab, whatever it may be, actually I say that, or the human resources tab itself. It's a common question we get, how do I know who has access to that? So I've just filtered that down. You do have to look up individual permissions. So I want to see who can view. It will obviously show who can't as well, and I can from here also change that to the individual user. So it's showing me all the users and who does or doesn't have access with that permission. And it's the same principle with roles, except for its roles itself. And that's probably one of the better places, the multiple roles versus permission, to have a quick review of, say, in that example of who has access to the human resources tab. I might decide to just go through and change the security role itself rather than individual users. All right, so that's pretty much the user security or admin. Keeping in mind, again, just as a quick reminder, STEMS accounts is where we invite or set up the users, and that's also where we can remove them. But in here is where we manage their permissions and where their permissions apply within the software. A couple of other points I was talking about earlier too. Obviously, we're improving the workflow of that new activation of a user and better communications. They will also stand out in here because I think they're planning on, they'll have it coloured, ones that they're activated, so to speak, but they haven't been assigned organisation structure or a security role. So they can't technically access until you do that. We do have, and fair enough, we do have questions that come in. We ourselves went through that as well. There was a bit of a learning curve that why is it that we cannot assign organisation structure and so forth through STEMS accounts? There is good reason for the fact that as more applications come online, the invitation process through STEMS accounts would be very technical, very complicated. So it has to work in the way that you invite from STEMS accounts, and then it is from here. And in the other application that we're about to look at, Comply One, managing their permissions. All right, so keep that in mind. That's why it's designed this way. You'll also see soon where once we do release this improved workflow with managing new users coming into STEMS One, mobile, oh, by the way, something I keep forgetting to point out that I should have said at the start. Only The only ones you do have to worry about, these are ready to go. When you invite a account owner or STEMS admin and they activate, if you're happy for them to have access to everything, then you do not need to do any more. They are assigned to the top of the organisation structure and they have their security role as a STEMS admin or system admin. But if you do need to further customise their permissions, that can be done, of course, like what we just went through. But it's these ones here, when you invite a STEMS user, that you will need to come into here, into admin, user security, and go through what we were talking about before, user data filter, assign their organisation structure, address the user data filter to do with the organisation structure where you want their permissions to apply. Then finally, if you invite a mobile only user, of course they won't have access to here, but the new improved process coming out soon will list the mobile only users here so that you can assign their organisation structure. All right, purely because currently there are some limitations with the mobile only user to do with data, what they can see and so on. And so that's being addressed through here very soon, where you'll be able to assign that organisation structure. Okay, well finally, with a few minutes to go, and I'll just check if there are any questions on STEMS 1 there and user security. And a quick look. So far, seems to be no questions. Finally, with Comply 1, user permissions section, which is over here, top right. It's quite simple, taking a much simpler approach to this one. Mainly with this, Comply 1 was really designed, or its intent was for setting up forms and ultimately publishing them for mobile app users. It really is primarily the objective to publish these things for mobile app users. So really users, as a general rule, or again our intention was that the users accessing the web version are managing the forms, the profiles, and the data coming in from the mobile app users through into the items register. So we do have some customers that are not using the mobile app, and people are going in and completing items on the web version, and it does cater for that, but that's not its main intent. And so where I'm going with that is our user permissions currently, as I take you through these, and by the way, in the user guide, there are descriptions of each of these permissions. First of all, view compliance literally just means view, and they can only view the profiles and items. They can't do anything. And we realise now that within reason, it's a fairly useless permission now. And what we are working on as we speak is that permission is changing to complete items, I think is what it's going to be called. And that means that if you want a user to just be able to come into the web version and complete it like a scheduled item that they must fill out or some other form, then all they'll need is this one. Currently, they're going to need both, view compliance and manage compliance. But the problem is it is a big jump forward. Again, we've only taken this on board since we've realised that we have some clients that their users are going straight to the web version to complete things. Hence, we will be improving this very shortly, and that'll be again called complete items. And that will be published in a communication as soon as we release that. All right, so manage compliance allows the user to create profiles, basically publish things, whether it's a scheduled item. So being able to create a scheduled item profile and assign that to someone, or a public form, and of course complete items as well. They can also process suggested actions and hazards that come in from completed items, and they can also go into the action and hazard register. That action register is linked with STEMS 1, and so is the hazard register. So anything created from here in Comply 1 will appear on STEMS 1 main action register. All right, now I am quickly running out of time, or I have run out of time, so I'll just finish wrapping up explaining these permissions. The next one, manage notifications, specifically as it says, means that the user could also go in and create notification profiles or change notification profiles. Settings, you'd want to give very few people access to these last two. Manage settings is literally where all the forms, columns, scoring systems, etc. are all created and updated through here. And then finally, as it says, manage security is giving the user the ability to come in here and manage permissions, other users' permissions. Any changes you make on here, simply click on Save. By default, by the way, if a user, when a user's first activated, their permissions are completely off. All right, just keep that in mind. So by default, they won't have any access to Comply 1. All right, so I'm out of time completely. Hopefully you gained something out of today's webinar to do with managing user permissions or managing users. If you do have any questions after this, or you need some further assistance, again, feel free to use support and one of us will be able to assist you. Currently, we don't have any webinars coming up in the short term, but we will be announcing some new ones very soon. All right, thanks very much everyone for your time, and goodbye for now, and maybe talk to you later.